95% of all high blood pressure cases are labeled as essential hypertension, which may sound like a diagnosis, but the reality is that means we don't really know why you have high blood pressure. But despite not knowing, the advice is always the same, right? Take this drug, cut back on salt. There's actually no curiosity as far as why people have high blood pressure. What I want to do in this video is walk you through 6 major causes of hypertension, or at least ones that I feel are major causes of hypertension, and go beyond just taking a pill or cutting back on salt. So I feel this needs to be done because if you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, right? When's the last time your doctor said, I want to find out why you have high blood pressure? I mean, my guess is those words have never been spoken, right? So without further delay, let's get started. The first cause on my list, as far as why people are diagnosed with hypertension, is very simple. It's a misdiagnosis. A great number of people are told they have high blood pressure simply because the blood pressure measurement wasn't taken properly. For example, if you go to the doctor's office and you have a full bladder, that can add 10 millimeters of mercury or 10 points to your blood pressure. Not having your back supported or your legs on the floor can add 6.5 millimeters of mercury or 6 points. Having your legs crossed can add 2 to 8 points to your blood pressure. Talking or actively listening while your blood pressure is being taken, that can add 10 points to your blood pressure. Having the blood pressure cuff placed over clothing, that adds a whopping 5 to 50 points to your blood pressure. If you're using the wrong cuff size, add 2 to 10 points to your blood pressure. And if your arm isn't supported or if it isn't at the level of your heart, it can add another 10 points. Now you may be wondering, where the heck did he get those numbers from, right? Well, I got it from the American Heart Association website. So here's a link. You can click on it, like scan your phone on it, and watch the video on their website. But it just goes to show you how much human error can seep into things when you're using a stethoscope and a manual cuff, which is why automated, validated devices, especially the ones that take multiple readings, are sort of becoming the new standard. And I recommend you getting your own for home, right? But not all blood pressure monitors are created equal. Make sure you're using a validated, automated upper arm cuff, because some over-the-counter devices, they haven't been accuracy tested. So you can find validated ones at validatebp.org, that's the American Medical Association's list, or stridebp.org. Now those websites list validated devices, meaning they've been independently tested and shown to give reliable numbers. But when taking your own blood pressure at home, take it twice a day. Once in the morning before meds, once again at night before you go to bed. And don't trust a single reading. Do 2 or 3 readings, 1 minute apart, every day for a week, average it out. That's your blood pressure. Also, avoid those wrist cuffs, right, or the finger monitors. Stick with upper arm cuffs, preferably the ones that take multiple readings and then they average them for you automatically. But the bottom line is, if you're going to make decisions for your health based on these numbers, make sure that those numbers are accurate. Okay? So moving on to the second cause of hypertension, like the root cause of hypertension, a lot of it comes down to, believe it or not, mouthwash, right? You might think that swishing your mouthwash is just a harmless part of your oral hygiene routine, but what if that minty rinse is actually causing hypertension, right? One of the most important ways that your body regulates blood pressure is by producing a gas called nitric oxide, which it relaxes and it widens blood vessels. And while some nitric oxide, most of it, is made by the vascular endothelial cells in your blood vessels, a surprising amount is actually made by the beneficial bacteria in your mouth that live on the tongue, and they convert dietary nitrate into nitrite, which is then turned into nitric oxide in the stomach. It's sort of a backup system independent of the nitric oxide synthase that your body makes nitric oxide from in your blood vessels. And it's especially important with people with endothelial dysfunction, like those people with hypertension. But here's the problem. Antibacterial mouthwash wipes out those nitrate-reducing bacteria. And without them, nitric oxide levels drop and blood pressure can rise. Okay, so researchers have found that frequent mouthwash users have significantly lower blood nitrite levels, which is a sign of reduced nitric oxide bioavailability. And those same researchers, in a large study called the SOULS trial, they found that using over-the-counter mouthwash twice a day was associated with an 85% increased risk of developing hypertension over 3 years, even after they adjusted for confounders like age and BMI and smoking and activity levels. So the takeaway is that long-term mouthwash may impair nitric oxide signaling by reducing the bacteria in your mouth and promoting inflammation, and then that sets up the whole process of cardiometabolic issues. So if you're dealing with high blood pressure, that bottle of mouthwash could be sabotaging your blood pressure all the time. Let's move on to exercise, and I think most people understand that exercise relates to blood pressure, but let's get into the details because it's always been a go-to recommendation for lowering blood pressure, right? But not all workouts are created equal. In recent years, researchers have compared moderate intensity continuous training, like sort of the classic 30 minutes of walking or cycling or easy jogging, to high intensity interval training or HIIT workouts, right? And the results are pretty eye-opening. A 2022 meta-analysis by Lee and colleagues found that HIIT training was significantly more effective than moderate intensity exercise in reducing systolic blood pressure, especially in people diagnosed with hypertension. Gao et al. In 2025, more recently, took it a step further, showing that while both HIIT workouts and moderate intensity workouts improved blood pressure, HIIT training led to greater improvements in vascular function, cardiorespiratory fitness, and resting blood pressure, particularly in adults over 60. So the takeaway here is, yeah, exercise helps, but intensity matters. And if you're physically capable and you have your doctor's clearance, short, intense bouts of exercise may give you more bang for your buck when it comes to lowering your blood pressure. So why does high intensity exercise lower blood pressure more effectively than moderate intensity workouts? Well, one major reason is that HIIT workouts stimulate those endothelial cells in the blood vessels, those inner lining of the blood vessels, to produce more nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a powerful vasodilator, meaning it relaxes and widens your blood vessels. More nitric oxide equals less resistance equals lower blood pressure, right? So HIIT training with its rapid spikes in blood flow and shear stress on the vessel walls actually stimulate those vascular endothelials to upregulate endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which is the enzyme that makes nitric oxide, which reduces your blood pressure. But that's not all. HIIT workouts also improve arterial compliance, so they make the blood vessels more sort of like elastic. They reduce oxidative stress, which normally sort of sucks up all the nitric oxide. HIIT workouts enhance insulin sensitivity, which also improves vascular function. They reduce sympathetic nervous system overactivity, especially in people with hypertension. And then here's a really wild take, which sort of takes us back to the whole mouthwash thing, which I know is a little weird of a correlation, but we already know that high intensity interval training improves cardiovascular health, but this new study adds a twist. High intensity interval training also changes the oral microbiome in ways that enhance nitric oxide production. So this brand new 2025 study had researchers showing that young men performing 8 weeks of HIIT training, they found significant changes in the composition of the tongue bacteria, particularly the kinds that help with nitric oxide production. And as a result of that, they also found higher plasma nitrite levels. So this implies then that part of HIIT's blood pressure lowering benefit may not come just from blood vessels, but from the mouth by enhancing this sort of nitric oxide bioavailability through a more favorable tongue microbiome. Who knew? But so while both moderate and high intensity exercise are beneficial, HIIT creates a stronger vascular signal, which unlocks more of your body's natural antihypertensive mechanisms. So let's move on to a more obvious one now, stress. I think most people understand that there's a role for stress in high blood pressure, but chronic stress actually doubles your risk, and I mean that literally. This 2017 meta-analysis pooled data from over 5,600 people and found that those with chronic psychosocial stress were 2.5 times more likely to develop hypertension. And then on the flip side, people with high blood pressure were 2.7 times more likely to report high stress levels. And this wasn't just a small bump, right? It was one of the strongest risk factors identified across these studies. So let's move on to sleep, right? One of the most underappreciated causes of high blood pressure is sleep. And we're not just talking about feeling groggy or sort of unfocused the next day. Poor sleep literally raises your blood pressure, and it's not a small bump, okay? Multiple studies show that if you're chronically sleep deprived, your risk of developing hypertension more than doubles. In one large analysis of the NHANES data, adults with poor sleep habits had nearly twice the odds of having high blood pressure, even after they accounted for diet and exercise and other lifestyle factors. But here's where things get even more compelling. A 2013 randomized trial, researchers asked one group of participants to extend their sleep by just 1 hour a night by going to bed 30 minutes earlier and waking up 30 minutes later. So on average, they gained about 35 minutes of additional sleep per night. And the result was amazing. Their systolic pressure dropped by 14 points and their diastolic dropped by 8 points. That's all without changing their diet, their exercise, or medications. And that amount of drop in blood pressure is more than what you see in most trials of a blood pressure medication when you take one blood pressure medication. So the mechanisms are well established. Poor sleep sort of activates this stress response signal, this HPA axis, which is your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, leading to elevated cortisol. And that ramps up inflammation, reduces nitric oxide, impairs endothelial dysfunction, it alters kidney handling of salt. It's like every organ involved in blood pressure regulation gets thrown off kilter. So if you're treating hypertension without addressing sleep, you may be missing one of the biggest root causes. All right, last but not least, this one holds a great deal of promise, and the research is honestly really only beginning to uncover, and that's the gut microbiome. So you've probably heard how much the gut microbiome affects cardiovascular disease and diabetes and neurodegenerative conditions, but it also affects your blood pressure. And if this is the first time that you're hearing that your gut microbiome can affect hypertension, you're not alone. Up until about a decade ago, the research barely existed. But since 2015, the science has exploded, right? With studies uncovering multiple ways that your gut microbiome can affect your blood pressure. So here's a great depiction of the timeline published in the journal Hypertension, which is a publication of the American Heart Association. Now, there's been countless studies that have shown an association between the gut microbiome and hypertension, but now we're seeing a ton of studies that are showing that the gut microbiome can actually cause hypertension. And this mainly comes from studies that use fecal transplants, so literally taking poop from one living organism and putting it into another, but you're transferring the gut microbiome when you do that. So several animal studies, scientists have transferred gut bacteria from hypertensive humans into germ-free mice, and the mice develop hypertension. But when the donor microbes came from humans without high blood pressure, the mice don't get hypertension. So that's not just correlation, that's cause and effect. So how does it happen? Well, first, through the immune system. A disrupted gut microbiome can weaken the intestinal barrier, a phenomenon called leaky gut, that allows bacterial fragments and toxins to go through the gut wall, and then that causes inflammation. And that inflammation damages blood vessels, stiffens arteries, drives up blood pressure. Second is through nerve signaling, right? Your gut and brain are constantly in communication via the vagus nerve. And when the gut microbiome is imbalanced, it can activate the sympathetic nervous system, your body's like flight or fight mode, which tightens blood vessels and raises blood pressure. And then third is through key metabolites. Healthy gut bacteria produce postbiotics. People have heard of prebiotics and probiotics, but there's also postbiotics. And in this case, short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. And butyrate helps relax blood vessels. It reduces inflammation and it supports metabolic health. But in people with hypertension, those beneficial bacteria that make butyrate, they're often replaced by bacteria that produce pro-inflammatory compounds. So the good news is you can totally change your gut microbiome, right? There's already studies showing that dietary changes, prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, and even, dare I say, fecal microbiota transplants can actually help lower blood pressure. So the gut isn't just along for the ride, it's actually one of the main drivers. And that may be one of the most underappreciated targets for treating high blood pressure. So since we started this whole video by saying 95% of hypertension is labeled as essential hypertension or primary hypertension, which basically means we don't know what's going on, when you step back and you look at the data, one pattern keeps showing up, right? Low nitric oxide, high vascular resistance, and lifestyle patterns that silently chip away at your body's ability to relax those blood vessels. So if we were to focus less on blocking and inhibiting and impairing our body's function by taking drugs that do that, and more on restoring what's missing, like nitric oxide, microbial diversity, metabolic flexibility, nervous system balance through sleep and stress, we'd actually start addressing the root of the issue. So the next time you get diagnosed with essential hypertension, just respond with, okay, what's the essential cause? Because you have to have curiosity as far as what is causing these things, right? You can't just take drugs to mask it. You have to figure out why it's going on and fix the root problem. Now, if you haven't seen my video on how blood pressure medications and most pharmaceuticals work by suppressing rather than solving, I'll leave a link to that here. So watch that video because it completes the entire picture. Take care.